I'd like to salute especially Mrs. Gabriela Lara, the Director of the Global Embassy of Activists for Peace, Mr. Miguel Sabino, National Coordinator of GEAP in Guatemala, the distinguished scholars, scientists, judges, the distinguished former president that is with us today, parliamentarians, diplomats, the, Mr. Deputy Olivio Monzon, the President of the Honorable Congress of the Republic of Guatemala, the Vice Ministers of Education that accompany us today, the General Directors of our ministry, the State Directors of our session, each one of those of you present here, the members of the media. I wish you a good day today. Within this so special summit is so special that a day was dedicated to analyze the education topic, a topic that represents a transcendental thing for our societies. It has been said, and it was already mentioned, about the necessity that within our education systems that the paradigm needs to be changed. That mechanicist paradigm, traditional one, needs to be changed for an integral one, a holistic one, and a more human one. And education represents the means how we can reach those changes, enabling the human being to be formed within the work frame of integrality and happiness. Those those of you who shared yesterday in the Ministry of Education, the special welcome that was prepared to you, especially those of you who hadn't been in Guatemala before, and those who came to our ministry. I hope that it had been a likable reception for you. Be welcome, and I hope that your stay in Bachil, the land of the reemergence of the corn, may be full of peace for you. Dear attendants, I'd like to tell you that for the Ministry of Education, it's very pleasant and of highly honor the presence of each one of you in this special activity to which we have been called. This is the fourth World Conference on Peace, and it's so good that they have decided that this activity should be in Guatemala, a small country from Central America, but with a lot of culture, with a lot of wealth, with a lot of diversity. It's a country that lived in armed conflict for over 3 decades, and the amount of pain and sadness that was left in many of the families is big. The causes that gave origin to the conflict haven't changed very much. Inequity, racism, discrimination, inequality, poverty, extreme poverty are still present in the society. There is only a different level on how we address those things. We have advanced a little since the signing of the peace. At least the Guatemalans were not fighting one another within an ideological war. That has changed. Current reality is different. However, we value that as a society we live in better conditions. Because of the celebration of the summit, the Ministry of Education of Guatemala declared of education interest the Peace Integration Summit through the Ministry Agreement 2009-2018, which was proclaimed through our systems of the national education system, and as the implementation of this declaration of interest, diverse actions were carried out and activities oriented to develop personal learnings and collective learnings about peace. All education centers, the professors, the students participated actively in this activity, promoted by the Ministry of Education. During the first week of the month of September, to the methodological guide in all education centers, Learning activities were carried out about the peace, which included analysis of national reality and world reality, the construction of knowledge about peace, but about above all, the definition of personal commitments, familiar commitments, and social commitments to construct a peace that is lasting in our society. The development of diverse encounters and social dialogues on bilingual intercultural education, education quality, education accompaniment, school nourishment, teachers training, among others, were oriented as educational conditions, institutional conditions to construct the peace. And how not to link these actions within the construction process for the peace. If education is a right, and everybody should have access to that, but a quality education for everyone, men and women, along a long life. Basically, taking the linguistic pertinence among other aspects, but fundamentally an education that doesn't have any kind of discrimination for everybody. Also considering equity as a condition that is necessary for creating the opportunity that everybody can study, that there's nobody without assistance, and being included in the education processes. After the end of a tremendous war of 30 years, 36 years, Guatemala knows and feels the transcendence and the deep sense of peace. So that's why it is of educational interest this Summit for the Peace and the education as a means to construct the peace. As a commitment within the peace agreements, the Guatemalan peoples that put together their thoughts, they dialogued, and they agreed on the content of an education reform, which focus is the construction of the commonwealth wellness as a condition for the peace. The educational reform agreed in Guatemala is oriented in the following axes: life in democracy and culture of peace, unity in the diversity, develop integral sustainable development, and science and technology. Each one of those fundaments has the aim of generating structural conditions to found the peace. Just like you, we are convinced that the peace is more than just the absence of war. It's the construction of people who can construct human beings that can create a holistic reality for their families, their communities, and the state. Education is fundamental for overcoming poverty and extreme poverty, to overcome discrimination and racism, to overcome the scientific and technological dependence. These are the most sensitive conditions that divide peace from the commonwealthness. That's why education needs to be understood as a human right. Just like it was visualized, just as I visualize it in my administration, education is a right for the peoples of Guatemala to form citizens with cultural identity that can contribute to coexistence and that contribute to the construction of plural development. In a world sense, education also has a sense that needs to be oriented to biological diversity and cultural diversity. Guatemala is the origin of civilizations that is characterized by the awareness and the cultural construction and the harmonization with the neighbors, with the territory, with the planet, and with the cosmos. The cosmovisions, the sciences, the values, arts, and spiritualities of its four peoples, Maya, Xinca, Garifuna, and the Mestizo, they are substantial contents for the preservation of humanity and of our Mother Earth. It is very important to understand also that the quality in education should not be reduced simply to quantitative results. It means that the quality of education is not only obtaining a high result in mathematics or in language, as it is typically known, but otherwise it is the development of citizen capabilities along their lives as a condition to ensure the continuous improvement of the human being. All these seeks to contribute to the sustainable prosperity that at the same time means food sovereignty, peaceful cohabitance, life in solidarity, capability of solving conflicts to dialogue, meditation, and the cohabitation with their neighbors and their environment, which is the common house that we have. The peace needs to be constructed in society, and education is a basic component and fundamental component for its construction. Education is the most important tool to eradicate the social ailments. Education, in all its dimension, teaches us to live in peace and in harmony with my other me as an authentic other. We recently had in Guatemala the 16th Summit of Ministers, Men and Women of Iberoamerica, and we examined with detail the points that we need to work on in favor of improving our education systems. We fundamentally need to work in improving the inclusion and equity for reaching the quality of the education that we deserve. This giving sustainability and prosperity to those who make use of those processes. Within that work frame, we analyze the clear accesses in terms of finding the improvement in education systems. It is urgent and necessary to widen the coverage of our education systems, but besides widening the coverage, also offer quality services. There's villages that are very little assisted, and that's why one of the main fundaments is education for the first stage of life of children between 0 and 6 years of age. We haven't been able to provide service for all of them, so there are some particular agreements in this sense. Other fundamental commitments is in terms of working for the educational competencies for the 21st century. We cannot continue teaching and working within our education systems as we were taught. We are in a modern age, in a different age, in which besides the development of science and technology, we also have to work within our educational systems aspects that are highly important in terms of democracy, tolerance, the principles, values, so that we can be happy as a society. Likewise, we consider to be important to work hardly to offer education along the life. And when I say that, I mean all those young and adults that for some reason are out of the education system because they never got to it or because they were ejected from them, directly or indirectly, from the system. We as a country, we have about 1,800,000 students who didn't finish school. And like this, there are other realities in our Latin America and in our world, in different countries. In fact, we have to work in favor of those populations so that the young and adult people have the probability of capability of fulfilling their dreams. Other of the important elements is working in terms of intercultural citizenship. We must recognize the linguistic and cultural wealth that there is in our countries. We need to give them value, appreciate them, and work with them within our systems. We should not continue the uniformity or the instant standardization of the processes, but what we should do is to respect the ancestral knowledges, the knowledges of our peoples, and in that way to work for the integral development. Another of the commitments in this summit is the ones that is related to governance in education. To thrive strongly for transparency, for the correct use of our resources, for the fact of acting in terms of the improvement of the education and the optimization of each one of the systems that we have. There are many more commitments, and it's clear to us that in order to construct peace, we need to develop an education that is integral, that generates happiness for our children, young people, and adult people. We cannot have peace in a society if at least those topics are not assisted, addressed. Of course, there are some other evils that needs to be addressed. Peace is a construction of all of us. Education is a good means to construct peace, but we need the connection of the family too. Also, the different organizations, and above all, a strong commitment to live with fullness in the search for the common wellness.